So it's nearing the end of a game session, and my D&D players are in the middle of a dungeon. They just beat back several waves of bugbears, but they know that the beasties are regrouping and readying for another assault. Fortunately, my players have fortified their position and are ready. However, it's 8:45 and the game session ends at 9 o'clock. But that's okay because we all know that we'll just hit pause and pick things back up right where we left off in the next game session. But what if we didn't? What if time kept going? What if the 2 weeks of real time that will pass before our next game session also passes in the game? What will happen to their characters? Will their fortified position hold for 2 weeks? Will the bugbears overwhelm them? And who gets to decide that? The players or the game master? Hello folks, welcome to the DM Lair. I'm Luke Hart, and on this channel I share my nearly 30 years of game master experience so that you can run amazing games that your players will love. And today we're talking about a forgotten old school method of gameplay commonly referred to as one-to-one timekeeping. The concept may seem foreign to you at first, especially if you're new to the game, and may even seem like it could never possibly work. However, I think that if you give it a try, you'll find an amazing new way to run campaigns that may revitalize and breathe fresh new life into your games. The basic concept. Now, the concept of one-to-one timekeeping in Dungeons & Dragons was originally introduced by Gary Gygax, the co-creator of D&D. He used it in the early days of the game, particularly in his Greyhawk campaign. In the 1979 Dungeon Master's Guide, Gygax emphasized that timekeeping was essential for maintaining a persistent world, especially in campaigns where multiple players or groups were involved. The idea was that in-game time should progress at the same rate as real-world time, ensuring that the game world remained dynamic and that players had to plan their activities carefully. This system was especially useful in play-by-mail games, West Marches campaigns, and mega dungeons, where different adventuring parties explored the same shared world. Gygax saw one-to-one timekeeping as a way to prevent players from dominating the game world through endless adventuring while others were absent. It also allowed for organic world building, where factions, NPCs, and events continued to evolve even when players weren't actively playing. Now, if you're looking to level up your Game Master skills, check out The Secret Art of Game Mastery. It's my flagship Game Master advice book, packed with everything I've learned from nearly 30 years behind the screen. But it's not just a one and done. There are 2 companion books that go even deeper. The Secret Art of Preparation helps you prep faster and smarter, so you're never scrambling before a session again. And The Secret Art of Note-Taking shows you exactly how to track NPCs, story threads, and player choices without drowning in a sea of index cards or sticky notes. Together, these 3 books are a complete toolkit for running amazing games, whether you're brand new to game mastering or you've been doing it for decades. If you've ever watched one of my videos and thought, man, I wish I could run games like that, this is how you get there. You can grab all 3 over on my website or by clicking the link down in the description. The Secret Art of Game Mastery is also available on Audible. The benefits of one-to-one timekeeping. One-to-one timekeeping offers 7 distinct gameplay benefits that make the world feel more immersive, strategic, and alive. First, it creates a living, breathing world. Since the world doesn't pause when players aren't around, NPCs continue their lives, rival adventurers may loot dungeons, and factions progress their goals. This makes the game world feel dynamic and reactive rather than static. In fact, you'll find that the game can become more about the world and less about the characters, which many players discover they thoroughly enjoy. Number 2, it encourages strategic time management. Time becomes another resource for the players to manage, and it's as valuable as gold. Thus, players must think carefully about travel, resting, and downtime. Since the players always know how much time they have to work with, they will consider if they would like to train to level, craft, travel, investigate, or gamble during their downtime. Do they spend 2 weeks crafting a magic item while another group explores the dungeon they wanted to loot? Do they travel to the next adventure location? Do they spend time leveling up or gathering information about the monsters down in the sewers? Number 3, it makes downtime meaningful. One-to-one timekeeping gives real weight to downtime downtime activities like research, training, crafting, and running businesses, which typically happen between every game session. If a wizard needs a month to copy spells into their spellbook, that's an actual month in the real world. Furthermore, running downtime like this allows characters to work independently with a fog of war between them. For example, the rogue may show up to a session with a trinket that belongs to a noble, and none of the other players will know why he has it or if he could be a wanted criminal. Number 4, it allows player participation in a shared world. One-to-one timekeeping allows multiple groups to play in the same world and even affect each other. These separate groups may even have different game masters from group to group, but keeping each group on the same time scale makes them compatible and able to exist in the same world. Furthermore, in games like this or West Marches style games, no single group can dominate the world by adventuring constantly. Since every player experiences time equally, this method ensures fairness and prevents power imbalances. So if you run multiple groups in the same shared world, this is the way to do it. Number 5, it reinforces consequences and urgency. If the villain's plan is unfolding over the next 3 weeks, that means something in one-to-one timekeeping. If players ignore it, the world moves forward without them. This adds tension and realism to in-game events. Number 6, it makes resource management matter. Food, supplies, and healing time become more important. If a dungeon crawl is stretched over several real-world weeks, rations and torches need to be accounted for. Imagine ending your session in the middle of a dungeon where the party decides to hole up. 2 weeks pass, but it turns out they didn't have enough rations or torches or water. Long-term wounds or magical curses also take time to heal. Number 7, it adds a layer of realism. The passage of real-world time maps to seasonal changes, economic shifts, and character aging. It prevents characters from cramming years worth of experiences into a few weeks of in-game time. You know what I mean. This is when the characters level from 1 to 10 in 2 weeks of game time. Since seasonal events and natural occurrences like moon cycles will happen at the same time in-game as they do out-of-game, this means that your yearly Christmas game could easily fit into your consistent world. Number 8, it accounts for missing players. One-to-one timekeeping makes handling players who can't make a game session quite easy. Since the group is heavily encouraged to not end a game session in the middle of a dungeon, but instead in town, if a player can't make a game session, their character simply stays in town for that game session. Overall, one-to-one timekeeping transforms a campaign into a persistent, evolving world rather than a series of disconnected adventures. It forces players to engage with the world in a different, more thoughtful way. By the way, if you're finding this information useful, please give me a thumbs up and share this video with a fellow game master. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, I've probably lost all faith in you and have no hope that you're ever going to do so. But please feel free to keep watching the videos because, hey, there's cool stuff in them, I think. And if there isn't cool stuff in them, why are you even here to leave nasty comments? Like, Luke, I watch your videos so I can leave nasty comments. Well, you are welcome to. I love people who watch my videos and just leave nasty comments because you're helping me. They're like, oh crap, now we're not going to leave nasty comments. No. You're actually not helping me. It's okay. Nasty comments make me feel really bad and will probably make me quit someday. How one-to-one timekeeping works. At a high level, one-to-one timekeeping is simple. However much time passes in the real world also passes in the game world. Now, that is the ultra strict way to run it, and game masters sometimes don't follow it exactly. To help explain how it works, an example probably works best. Your adventuring group is known as the Deep Delvers. Before the game session begins, you tell your game master that you're traveling to the tomb of tomb. You're traveling to the tomb. No, it is tomb. It is tomb. You're traveling to the tomb of Saint Elnor, where an ancient evil is rumored to have awakened. I should just say crypt. It's probably going to be easier for me to say crypt because then I won't get confused. Anyway, your aim is to be at the entrance of the crypt for the start of the next game session. So the game session comes and you begin to delve into the tomb crypt. You're beating beasties, taking their loot, and discovering more about this ancient evil. Then there's only 15 minutes left in the game session, so you decide to retreat from the crypt and hole up in a nearby cave. Then the game session ends and you all go home. However, time doesn't stop. 2 weeks will pass between then and your next game session. That means 2 weeks pass in the game as well. So at the beginning of the next game session, the game master asks you all what you were doing during those 2 weeks. Maybe you researched more about the monsters you had run into on the dungeon. Some of you caroused. The rogue worked on building his thieves guild. The fighter was pit fighting, so on and so forth. So the beginning of the game session is spent resolving those 2 weeks. Furthermore, you might resolve some things in the wider game world that happen during those 2 weeks. Of course, instead of at the beginning of the next game session, maybe the group resolves those 2 weeks worth of events away from the table during the 2 weeks they aren't together gaming. This could be handled on Discord or a similar platform, and likely each player has their own separate chat with the game master so that they can do things unbeknownst to the other players if they wish. With this method, when the group comes back to the game table at their next session, they could have traveled back to the crypt of St. Elnor where they began delving once again. Either way, once the group gets back into the crypt, they discover that room after room they hadn't yet explored has been cleaned out. There are rotting carcasses of monsters and everything has been looted. Another group must have been there in the last 2 weeks while they were in town. In fact, they discover that the entire crypt has been cleared out. The loot is gone and the ancient evil has been dealt with. Someone else stole their dungeon. So they head back to town with an axe to grind and resolve to find out who that other group was and get their loot back. And that's the main idea in a nutshell. But I bet you have questions, so let's go. I'm so dumb. Anyway, questions. What happens if the group stays in the dungeon between game sessions? If the group is in the middle of a dungeon and 2 real-world weeks pass before they resume play, the game master has a few ways to handle this. Retreat and downtime. A common approach is to require characters to return to a safe location before the session ends. If they don't, they risk being lost, trapped, or suffering consequences for staying in a dangerous place. Players might return to town, restock supplies, or spend downtime before the next session. Time passes without them. If the group left their characters in the dungeon, then 2 in-game weeks have passed. The GM decides what happens during that time. The monsters reinforce their positions? Do other adventurers plunder the area? Does food and water become an issue? This enforces the idea that the world moves on, even when players aren't actively participating. NPC intervention. The game master might narrate how the characters got out of the dungeon, either through their own efforts or via a rescue, and impose logical consequences. Maybe they were forced to flee, leaving treasure behind, or they got captured and must now escape. Player responsibility. In strict one-to-one campaigns, players must schedule their adventures carefully to avoid being stranded. If they knowingly delve into a dungeon without securing a way out before the session ends, they accept the risks of what happens during the downtime. Now, must one-to-one timekeeping be strictly followed? Of course not. It's your game. You follow or change the rules as needed. A minute-by-minute accounting of time, for instance, if the group travels for half a day, you must spend the same amount of time at the game table waiting, doesn't need to be followed. In fact, that's a great example of when you wouldn't want to follow one-to-one timekeeping. Just speed time up. Otherwise, you're gonna sit there bored and that makes 0 sense. Furthermore, you could pause the game mid-adventure or mid-dungeon if you desire. What you do here is just pick up the dungeon next week, finish it out, and then when the players head back to town, they have extra downtime to use to catch up with the real time clock, the real world time clock. Tips for implementing one-to-one timekeeping. First, use a planner, just like the ones people use for school. A calendar where you can write down the date things will be finished or occur is invaluable. I suggest an online calendar that all players can see and reference, if not actually edit. Next, you don't need to spend a bunch of time in between sessions on downtime. Some of us are busy and that's just not feasible, so it's okay to just quickly adjudicate at the beginning of a game session what happened during the 2 weeks of downtime. And be sure to ask people at the beginning or end of a game if they want their activities to be secret. If they do, they'll need to message it to you or go with you into another room to resolve. By the way, there is nothing more suspenseful for the rest of the players when the game master and the one player go off into a room to discuss something. It's great. And I say that as a player who has had the game master and another player go off into a room, and you're sitting there wondering, oh crap, what's going on? What are they doing? It's a beautiful thing. Now, like any other new mechanic you may use, I always suggest trying it out exactly as written so you can experience it in its strictest, truest form. Do that for a while before you attempt to tweak it. It will be a change from what you normally do, so it will feel odd, and you'll be tempted to change it right out of the gate so that it's not so alien. However, that'd be doing your group a disservice. Remember, like any way of running the game, this may not be for everyone. However, if you never give it a try, you'll never know. But that's just what I think. Let me know in the comments what you think about one-to-one timekeeping. Now, if you'd like to learn how to properly implement NPC betrayal in your game, watch this video right here. And until next time, happy game mastering.